electricity cut and my Wi-Fi got shut. So yeah, you were telling something, sir?
Yeah, we thought that your network was poor. That's why you got disconnected.
Yeah.
But
So
then you can continue, Pankaj.
yes, sir. Okay. So I was discussing that how the nausea and vomiting are different. So nausea is usually a sensation that patient feel like there is a need to vomit, and usually referred either at the throat or epigastrium, that may not patient is not able to vomit. So nausea is usually more common than vomiting, especially on those patients who are on chemotherapies or when it is related to the drugs. So, and many a times patients says that the nausea is more unpleasant than vomiting. If they have vomiting, then they feel better after that expulsion of vomiters. So vomiting is the expulsion of gastric content that is due to contraction of the abdominal muscle wall and chest wall musculature. And third thing is retching. So retching is some that rhythmic movement of the diaphragm and abdominal muscle, and that may not be associated with the expulsion of the gastric content. So it is important to know the terminology. How frequent it is. So as I said, it is very common, and at some point of time almost all patients complains of some nausea or vomiting. Almost at any point of time, almost 40 to 60% of the patients with advanced cancer reports nausea or vomiting, and almost half of the patients at their end of their life reports nausea, vomiting. It is very common if the patient is on radiotherapy or chemotherapy, but it depends on what part of body is being irradiated, or how big part is being irradiated. In case of chemotherapy, it depends on what is the hematogenicity of chemotherapy. So even with a very good prophylactic medications, almost 1/3 of the patients complaints of significant nausea. And so what are the common causes in our patients? So it can be related to the disease also. So disease per se can cause vomiting. So it can be in the cancer or heart failure, there is congestion. In COPD, there's chronic cough can cause vomiting. In renal failure, there may be uremia that can cause vomiting. Sometimes it is related to the treatment or medications that are being given for the disease. Sometimes it may be related to the debility that is because of the disease, or because of the age, patient is not able to walk around, or the immunity is reduced. So like the chronic constipation can cause vomiting. Extreme cachexia or persistent anxiety can lead to vomiting. Many times the GI infections like candidiasis may lead to nausea, vomiting. And sometimes it may be unrelated to the disease, like mesenteric ischemia or perforations may lead to nausea or vomiting. Before we discuss on the management of vomiting, it is very important to know about the pathophysiology. Very important to understand the nausea vomiting pathway. Okay, so yeah. So you can see here in the red, in this pink boxes, and these are usually the receptors and the neurotransmitters, and in the blue box, the causes of vomiting. So the central vomiting center, that is known as emetic center or vomiting center, it is nucleus junctus solitarius, that is in the lateral wall of in the midbrain. It is located. So it is the main center responsible for the vomiting. So, but it receives signals from various area. So one of the many most important area that is also called as area proxima or chemoreceptor trigger zone. So it has receptors for many neurotransmitters that can cause vomiting, and mainly the vomiting is stimulated either because of the drugs or stimulus from the vagus nerve. So common drugs like opioids, digoxin, chemotherapies, or some metabolic disorders like uremia, hypercalcemia, or some bacterial toxins, radiotherapy can lead to stimulation of area proxima. Main receptors that are located there are dopamine, that is D2 receptor, serotonin, muscarinic receptor, histaminic receptor, and neurokinin receptors. Other stimuli is from the gastrointestinal tract. So there it may be because of some glossopharyngeal stimulation that is usually seen in like vomiting, gastroparesis that may be because of mm, hypokalemia or hypercalcemia, or maybe after surgery. Sometimes gastroenteritis, maybe because of the toxins. Graft versus host disease, gastritis, bowel distension because of chronic constipation, post-operative, any inflammation or infection in the peritoneum, any vascular occlusion that is causing the edema in the gut wall, or chemotherapy and radiotherapy, those are causing mucositis in the gut mucosa. These all things can lead to release of serotonin, and that is received by the perceived by the vagal afferent nerves, or sometimes splenic nerves in the GI tract. And these vagus can directly stimulate the emetic center, or through the area proxima center. Third cause is through the cognition, or that we call it as from the cerebral cortex. So it may be like in anticipatory nausea, vomiting, that conditioning responses found after the prolonged vomiting from by the chemotherapies. Maybe some anxiety that is related, or sometimes if there is increased intracranial tension, so like the brain edema, or because of tumor. Migraine also leads to cause vomiting through cerebral cortex. Other thing that we see usually when the it is associated with the motion sickness, so that is labyrinthine stimulus. So in palliative care, this is not very common stimulation of the labyrinth, but sometimes can be associated. So it is mediated through histamine receptor, and antihistaminics are usually given for this. Okay, so these receptors and neurotransmitters are very important. Raji, there is some disturbance? Can you mute others?
I request all to stay muted.
Yeah. So we have seen patients with severe pain usually have vomiting sensation also. So pain also can cause vomiting sensation. How it can cause pain sensation? It is through afferent sympathetic neuron in the spinal cord, and usually that substance P activates the area proxima, and also that dorsal vagal complex through NK1 receptor. So main important thing is NK1 receptors that can cause the vomiting in the presence of pain. So this I have already discussed that there are two centers, the vomiting centers, that is mainly in the nucleus structus solitarius, and area prostoma, that is chemoreceptor trigger zone. So the thing about chemoreceptor trigger zone, I think you already know that it is situated outside the blood-brain barrier, and many drugs can, that even doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier can also stimulate this area and cause the vomiting. It is very important, especially in chemotherapies. Okay. So what's the mechanism of vomiting? So this is like how the vomiting occurs. So here, first there is relaxation of lower esophageal sphincter. Then there is a retrograde contraction in the proximal and small bowel and antrum musculature. Then there is a sudden constriction of the abdominal muscles that is followed by contraction of the copharyngeal muscle, and then sudden relaxation of it. And when the relaxation occurs, the expulsion of the gastric content occurs. So here I have discussed the causes and the management of nausea vomiting according to the causes. So to remember it, it is the 10M causes. So all starts with M. So it can be metastasis either in the brain, and that leads to raised ICT. If it is because of the raised ICT, the steroids or mannitol are helpful. So it is very important. Many a times patients presents only with nausea vomiting, and that we have to rule out other causes, and we should have a suspicion for raised ICT if it is associated with headache or blurred vision or some disorientation. If it is associated with liver metastasis, the toxin builds up and can cause vomiting, and at that time dopamine antagonists can help. Sometimes it is because of meningeal, that is leptomeningeal disease or raised intracranial tension. So again, in that case, steroids are helpful. Usually we use on the high doses of dexamethasone. Very important cause of nausea vomiting, especially in palliative medicine setting, is medication. And among them, opioid are most notorious to cause nausea, vomiting, and constipation. So in those cases, my drug of choice is prokinetic. Prokinetic because it works on dopamine receptor, and also it increases the gut motility. So if a patient doesn't have any benefit with prokinetics, then I can move to haloperidol or olanzapine, other dopamine antagonists. Then other cause may be related to chemotherapies. So chemotherapies usually cause either GI mucositis or activation of chemo trigger zone. So the drug of choice will be 5-HT3 antagonist, usually ondansetron or granisetrons. Sometimes steroids also help, so that is usually under the protocol of chemotherapies, and it helps usually in the early nausea vomiting post chemotherapy. NSAIDs can cause gastritis, and that can cause vomiting. So always we should use the PPIs with that. If it is still associated, then antihistaminics can be used in that cases. Next M is movement. So it can also be like we discussed the vestibular stimulation. So either because of the motion, or sometimes morphine can also can cause vestibular stimulation. So in that case, some acetylcholine antagonist. So usually antihistaminic, H1 antihistaminics can be used. Next is mentation. So mentation means that is some cognitive thing or cortical activity like anxiety or there is like anticipatory nausea vomiting is there. In that case, some psychotherapies or benzodiazepines can be helpful. Then next M is mechanical cause. So mechanical cause, it can be either within the lumen, that is luminal, or in the wall, or extraluminal, that is compression from outside. So within the bowel lumen is usually the chronic constipation. So usually it is very common in our patient, and patient may have very prolonged constipation that prevents the propulsion of the gastric content, and that may cause retrograde nausea and vomiting. So in that case, we have to manage constipation. And the wall, it may be some stricture or the tumor of GI tract that is causing the bowel obstruction. So in that case, we have to manage the bowel obstruction. I think bowel obstruction will be another seminar. So there it can be discussed later. And third, maybe again the extrinsic compression by either the peritoneal mats or mats in the lymph nodes. So that again can cause a bowel obstruction, and in that cases, either the disease modifying treatment or steroids can be helpful. Then, and the seventh M is metabolic, and that is very important in palliative care setting. So usually hypercalcemia is very common in our patient, especially with patient with lymphomas or esophageal cancer, head and neck cancers, and patients with bone metastasis, say breast or prostate. That those patients can lead to hypercalcemia, and patients have intractable.
Pankaj, your voice is.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So hypercalcemia can be a very important cause, and if there are no other cause, we have to look for hypercalcemia also. Other suspicion of hypercalcemia in means because patient presents only with nausea, vomiting in and the pointers toward hypercalcemia is if there is associated prerenal AKI, like there is reduced urine output, or patient is presenting with features of dehydration. In that case, we should look for calcium level also. So treatment will be to lower down the calcium level. Other is hypokalemia. By mistake, I wrote hyponatremia, but hyponatremia can also present with nausea. But hypokalemia can cause the gastric stasis and gastroparesis, and can present as nausea, vomiting. In case of liver and renal failure, there may be toxin accumulation, and that can cause nausea, vomiting. In that case, usually the haloperidol or olanzapine will be the drug of choice, and we can use the antihistaminics also. Then eighth cause is motility. So motility means there is a reduced motility of the gut. It can be because either of the opioids, or there is a paralytic ileus, or maybe because of some other medications that causes decreased gut motility. So our drug of choice again will be prokinetic, and sometimes they are small bowel or large bowel gut stimulant laxatives. Then maybe mucosal damage because of the chemotherapies, NSAIDs, or peptic ulcer diseases that can cause irritation to the gut mucosa or gastric mucosa. In that cases, usually antacids or cytoprotectives or those barrier medications like sucralfate can be used. And then the last cause may be infection also. So infection, we have to look for oral candidiasis or suspect the esophageal candidiasis, any oral ulcerations in oral cavity that are infected. In such cases, topical antibacterial and antifungal treatment can be used. Routine salt and soda gargles should be used in those suspected cases. Other maybe some GI infections and systemic sepsis should be considered if it is associated with fever or other symptoms of infection. So this was about the causes and the management according to the causes. We will go to okay, before that, some of the important clinical presentations, how we can suspect what can be the causes. So depending on the presentation of the vomiting. So if it is intermittent nausea that is associated with early satiety, and usually that is associated with fullness or bloating sensation after taking the feed, that is suggested of impaired gastric emptying, or there is a gastroparesis. In that case, some prokinetics can be helpful, like domperidone or metoclopramide. If the vomiting is persistent and it is aggravated by the sight or smell of food, and if it is not relieved by the vomiting, then it is usually because of activation of the chemoreceptor triggered zone, and we should see for any drug related causes if it is associated. If there is intermittent nausea and associated with colicky abdominal pain and associated with obstipation or sometimes the spurious diarrhea, then we might have to suspect toward the bowel obstruction. So here the nausea is relieved after the vomiting, and usually that vomitus is feculent, and it is either bilious or feculent and very bad smell, and the vomitus is very large in that cases. If the vomiting is more in the morning time and associated with either the blurring of the vision or headache or some dizziness, it can point towards the raised intracranial pressure. Usually it is not associated with nausea, but sometimes it also can be. So we should not go by the book definition that it is not associated with nausea. Sometimes it may also be. And then if it is associated with the movement or like a motion sickness, then it can have some vestibular component, and antihistaminics can be helpful. And as we discussed, that if it is associated with anxiety, then there may be some cortical component, and there may be a mix-up of two presentations or two causes, so we have to go clinically also in that case. Now we will go to antiemetics depending on where it works. So if we go back to our vomiting pathway, we have seen a lot of receptors there, and according to receptors there are some drugs. So it may be related to histamine receptors or acetylcholine receptors. In that case, usually the hyoscine butyl bromide may be helpful, that is antimuscarinic. If it is related to 5-HT2 receptors, olanzapine, that is 5-HT2 receptor antagonist. Aprepitant, that is very commonly used nowadays in cases of chemotherapy associated nausea vomiting, that works through NK1 receptors, and these works at vomiting center or nucleus tractus solitarius. In area prostema, that is chemotherapy receptor trigger zone, The main receptor is dopamine receptors, and the drugs working on that are haloperidol, metoclopramide, or domperidone. Domperidone has main effect on the gut, the dopamine receptors in the gut, but can also have some activity at the area prostima also. 5-HT3 receptors like antagonists are like ondansetron or ganisetron, and in area prostima also there are NK1 receptors present, and aprepitant can be used for that. In the cerebral cortex, there are benzodiazepine receptors and cannabinoid receptors. So in that case, lorazepam or dexamethasone can be used, and nabilone, that is for the cannabinoid receptors. In the gut, if we see, the main one are 5-HT4 receptor agonist, that is metoclopramide, D2 receptor antagonist, that is metoclopramide or domperidone, and mortellin receptor agonist, that is antibiotic erythromycin. Anti-secretory, that is especially useful in the cases of bowel obstructions, like antimuscarinic or somatostatin analog. These reduces the secretion within the lumen of the gut and can be very helpful in reducing the vomitous content. And so hyoscine and octreotide are the drugs in such cases. To reduce the vagal 5-HT3 receptor blockade, ondansetron or aprepitant can be used, that works through 5-HT3 receptor or NK1. And in the cases of inflammation, I was telling that it works through dopamine antagonism and also 5-HT4 agonist in the gut mucosa. So, and for serotonin antagonism, usually the drug required doses are quite high, that is more than 100 mg per day. Main work is prokinetic. It works as a prokinetic agent, and that's why it is my favorite drug if I suspect any opioid induced nausea, vomiting, or even in other cases also. I hear there is a very important terminology, that is dopamine break. So what happens? Dopamine, there is regulation between the dopamine and serotonin. So the dopamine reduces the gut motility, and serotonin increases the gut motility. So what happens if we use the dopamine antagonist? It will block the dopamine break on the gut motility, and can reduce the nausea because of stress, anxiety, or because of other causes. Usually, in the dose required by for the metoclopramide is higher to block the dopamine break. So we use infusion of around 60 to 100 mg per day to block the dopamine break. Okay. Usually the adverse effect of metoclopramide are acute dystonic reactions that can be seen either in the skeletal muscle spasm, usually in the upper limb, or maybe facial. It is more common in young women. So it may be very uncommon, but if it occurs, especially with IV infusions, we have to be watchful of this. Other side effect, it can also cause drowsiness or some restlessness, or sometimes diarrhea also. Caution, we should use with caution in cases of epilepsy, especially in patients with Parkinson disease, because it can lead to increased dystonic reactions in Parkinson. So we should not use in the cases of Parkinson disease. If a patient had underwent any GI surgeries, major GI surgeries, we should not use metoclopramide, especially initial 3 days of the surgeries. And also, if there is a complete bowel obstruction or if patient has colic, because the perinom, the metoclopramide is prokinetic and it can worsen the colic, so we should not use in presence of colic. And if there is a complete bowel obstruction, it may lead to bowel perforation, and so in that case we should not use metoclopramide. In case of a partial bowel obstruction, sometimes we use, but that is also should be with caution, and we should see with within 24 hours if there is any improvement in symptoms of bowel obstruction, perinom can be used. Interaction. So as we know that it is a prokinetic, we should not use it with antimuscarinic drugs or that drugs that relaxes the bowel. So like hyoscine, we should not use the hyoscine and metoclopramide. Basically, these two are antagonistic actions, so we should not use in that case. And also means we should not mix with, this is a very common practice in oncology, that people mix the metoclopramide with ondansetron. Their action is different, we should not use this thing, and also sometimes it can also lead to cardiac arrhythmias. Okay, so this was about the metoclopramide. Next is domperidone. Domperidone basically works through dopamine D2 receptor antagonism, and it does not cross the blood-brain barrier, so it is mainly in the gut, but also it can have anti-nauseating effect on CTZ also, that is an area of blastema. And as we discussed, it can also counteract the dopamine break also. In cases of renal failure, the plasma half-life is increased by around 50%. So we need to decrease the doses in case of renal failure. The better thing is, like domperidone usually does not cause the undesirable effect of metoclopramide, so that drowsiness or loss of mental acuity is not there in cases with the domperidone. So commonly it comes in the name of Domestil, and very commonly used with tramadol as a prophylactic anti-vomiting drug. The interactions, so interaction, it should not be used with CYP3A4 inhibitors like ketoconazole, erythromycins, SSRIs, and macrolide antibiotics. So if we are using azithromycin, we should not use domperidone in that case. Also, domperidone can also lead to increased risk of QT prolongation and sometimes Torsades de Pointes, especially if it is used with CYP3A4 inhibitors. And then again, as it is a prokinetic drug, we should not use in the cases of surgeries or if there is a bowel obstruction. The main adverse effect is it can cause galactorrhea, gynecomastia because of the increased prolactin secretion, and can lead to reduced libido. Really, it also can cause pruritus or headache. Colic, it can also cause colic, but it is lesser than the perinom. Then the ondansetron, and this is the favorite drug used by the oncologist. So you can see very commonly in the patients with cancers that patients are on ondansetrons. So ondansetron work as a antagonist to serotonin receptor, that is 5-HT3, that is on the vagus nerve, but it can also work in the vomiting center and area proxima also. So the common side effect of ondansetron is it can cause lightheadedness or dizziness. Very infrequently it causes any dystonic reactions, but we have to be watchful if there is any deranged LFTs. In that case, we should reduce the doses of ondansetron, or should be a bit cautious in case of liver failure. As opposite to prokinetic drug, 5-HT3 antagonist can reduce the gut motility and can cause the constipation. So that's why it is not very commonly used in palliative care setting, but it should be used when it is associated with the drug that is causing stimulation of CTZ. Other thing is we have seen very commonly that it is used along with tramadol to counteract the vomiting side effect of tramadol, but it should not be used because ondansetron reduces the analgesic effect of tramadol. So in such cases with tramadol, I usually use the either metoclopramide or domperidone with tramadol. There are other group of medications like haloperidol and olanzapine. These usually works centrally and are a favorite in case of either when it is associated with bowel obstruction, the nausea vomiting associated with bowel obstruction, or associated with opioids. So because it works at the central level, it does not affect the motility of intestine. It does not reduces or neither it increases the colic. And so typical, so it works through pure D2 receptor block in the area proxima or in the vomiting center. Usually drug dose is 0.25 to 2 mg. Can be repeated every 8 hourly. Olanzapine can have antagonistic effect on D1, D2, or D4, and also on serotonin receptors. Usually dose is 2.5 mg to 10 mg per day. Then other drugs that are used are steroids. So steroids are used very useful in malignant bowel obstruction, vomiting because of raised intracranial pressure, and also because of chemotherapies. So the possible mechanism, although it is not clearly known by how the corticosteroid works, but it can cause the depletion of GABA stores in the medulla. It can reduce the permeability of blood-brain barrier. So the vomiting because of activation of the emetic center. And also it can cause the inhibition of enkephalin release in the brain stem also. So usually the doses required are 4 to 8 mg, but if it is because of malignant bowel obstruction or raised ICT, we can use up to 16 mg per day. Octreotide is to reduce the gastric secretions, and usually it is used subcutaneously or IV as 100 to 200 microgram 8th hourly. Hyoscine, same indications as octreotide. Cannabinoids are not very commonly used, but it has been found that these are very effective in chronic or persistent nausea vomiting. Benzodiazepines, if it is associated with anxiety, as we discussed. So cannabinoids. So cannabinoids, it works by agonists, and these are agonists to cannabinoid receptors in the area proxima vomiting center or in the dorsal motor nucleus in the brain stem. How much? Okay. I think we are running out of time. We thought we will cover the constipation also, but we will not be able to do constipation. We will finish the nausea vomiting now. Okay. So important here, I will just discuss in brief about the opioid-induced nausea vomiting. So it is very, very common if the patient is on opioids to have the nausea and vomiting. So either it can present as nausea or vomiting with either means even with weak opioids or strong opioids. So tramadol very commonly causes nausea vomiting. Morphine very commonly causes. Fentanyl can also cause. Usually in the tolerance, they develop tolerance uh, uh, to nausea vomiting after using it for some days to weeks. But it is important to give anti-vomiting medications because it can affect the compliance, the absorption of the medications, and also the quality of it can worsen the quality of life of the patient. So pathophysiology, it is because opioid can increase the vestibular sensitivity or can activate the CTZ through the mu receptor pathway. It can decrease the gut motility and causing the stresses there, and also very less. It can suppress the vomiting at very high dose, and but the nausea can still be there. So patient may have nauseating sensation there. If the patient have a very severe nausea vomiting, we should consider the titration or rotation of the opioids. So if a patient has severe nausea vomiting with tramadol, tapentadol can be used. If a patient is having side effect because of morphine, then fentanyl or some other strong opioids can be used. In cases of very severe or persistent nausea vomiting, specific opioid antagonist like alpha methyl naltrexone can be used, but it is very rarely used, and especially in India, it is not available in most of the centers. Then, as I said, the drug of choice is haloperidol or olanzapine can also be used. My drug of choice is metoclopramide. First line drug would be metoclopramide for me. And as I said, there are some other medications like hydromorphone or tapentadol that are lesser emetogenic and that can be used. And then there are some non-pharmacological measures also, so that can also be used. So it is important to educate the patients about the possible side effect. So patient will know what is likely to happen. Explore their hopes and fears and review whenever possible. And sometimes the ginger roots or pyridoxines can be helpful in reducing the nausea vomiting. Some measures to enhance their gastric emptying, like using the liquid diet, more frequent and small meals can be used, and food low in lipids and fiber and high in protein can be used. Other thing that causes more nausea, like we should not give very hot food, so or we should give the cool foods or foods without any odor, or food which have pleasant appearance can be given. So these are some of the non-pharmacological measures, but very important. Okay, so can we cover constipation later with some other symptoms, maybe because of with bowel obstruction, Raji?
Yes, Pankaj, we can cover that in the next session.
Okay, okay, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we can go to questions and answers
yeah.
if there are any queries.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj. Now we know that nausea and vomiting is not very simple, and it is a highly complicated circuit, and there are many receptors involved in this, and you can ask your doubts. Anybody? No
Hi,
doubts?
good afternoon. I just want to say that it was very detailed and very good presentation by Dr. Pankaj, and he walked us through the entire vomiting and nausea setup. It's a shame that time is over, but I would have expected constipation to be over too. So, good presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed.
Mm,
There is one question in the chat that perinom and anesthetic is given in obstetric patients. I'm sorry, I don't have any clue about the obstetric practice, but in cases of in palliative medicine, we usually avoid this combination. Okay. So there is another question is the use of domperidone, when to use the domperidone and when to use the ondansetron. So as we discussed, these two are completely different entities of drugs. Domperidone is a prokinetic drug. So, and ondansetron is ondansetron works on 5-HT3 receptor. So especially if the vomiting is associated with any drug, if you suspect that that this drug is activating the CTZ, then ondansetron should be used. Domperidone, if you suspect that if there is any gastric stasis, maybe because of the drug or any other causes, then I will use the domperidone, or the vomiting is not very severe and we want to use some a safer anti-emetic drug. So like in someone who is driving or doing the physical work also, where I don't want to use metoclopramide, domperidone can be the first line drug as a prophylactic drug also. Is there any injectable form of domperidone? Sorry, I'm not aware of any injectable form. As far as I know, there are only oral tablet comes, but its bioavailability is quite good, so that should not be a problem. PUD, okay, that's peptic ulcer diseases. Okay, yeah, domperidone is very commonly used in those cases, yeah, and it makes sense also to use domperidone in cases of PUDs, because the irritation is mainly in the gut, and many a times because of irritation in the gut mucosa in peptic ulcer diseases, there is the stress is associated with that, and domperidone can be used in such cases if there is peptic ulcer disease, and it's a common practice that people use it along with pantoprazole. Usually, I will not prefer to use with pantoprazole or any other drugs, because the action is very limited of domperidone. It should be used every 8 hourly, while PPIs are used either once a day or twice a day. Next question is, in the geriatric population, should we be careful while using any specific antiemetic? Yes, it's a very good question. In geriatric population, I keep two things in mind. That is If a patient have some Parkinson's features, then metoclopramide is not used. Again, problem with metoclopramide, it can cause some drowsiness, and in some cases there are association with the fall also. So in such cases, the perinom is the metoclopramide is not a very preferred drug. Otherwise, the problem with ondansetron, it can cause more constipation. So if there is no constipation or constipation causing drugs, then ondansetron can be used, or domperidone would be can also be used. Domperidone doesn't cause much aggravation on the Parkinson's. Pediatric population, domperidone not advocated. I'm sorry, I'm not very sure, or I don't know about that. Whether it is used in pediatric population, but I have to see that. Okay, other question is, in post-op patients, when tramadol is given, then domperidone can be given later or pre-op. It depends on what surgeries we are using, we are doing. Usually, like tramadol, if it is given post-operatively, we can give just before giving the injectable tramadol in that case. If a patient can take orally, then you can give domperidone. Otherwise, injectable perinom can be given. Only thing, if a patient is undergoing the gut surgeries, I will not use the metoclopramide. In that case, ondansetron can be given.
Dr. Sandeep, can you tell us why domperidone is not used in pediatrics? Okay.
Dr. Sandeep, you wish to answer it, sir?
Okay, he might be back.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Let's move on to patient story.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for good participation. The take-home message from this seminar should be: we have to identify the cause of nausea, vomiting, and use the drugs judiciously. According to the cause, we should identify the cause, and according to that, we should use the drugs, not just like using densatron for every patient. So we can go to the case presentation now, sir.
Yeah. And so today the patient story will be presented by Dr. Adul. Adul,
Good afternoon, sir. Is it audible?
Yes, you
yeah,
are.
you are audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Pankaj sir, Sunil sir, and Rajalakshmi, and all the technical team. And thank you for this opportunity for presenting the case. Today I'm going to present about a patient of stomach cancer. She is a 54-year-old female. And next slide, please. She presented to us with complaints of vomiting and fever, abdominal pain, and constipation. Vomiting was like multiple episodes per day, and it was immediately after food or water itself. And the vomitus contains yellowish, sometimes bilious vomiting, and rarely history of hematemesis also there. And the fever was high grade, like 104 degree Fahrenheit. She complained of abdominal bloating, and abdominal pain was like occasional, on and off, not really associated with vomiting. And she had a history of constipation since 1 week, and she was not a known case of diabetes or hypertension or like thyroid or something, and she didn't have any surgery in the past. Next slide, please. On examination, she was like moderately built and nourished, and she was severely anemic, and vitals were stable except for temperature. She had 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and on systemic examination, per-abdominal findings were like the abdomen was mildly distended and diffuse tenderness was present, and visible gastric peristalsis was not found, and there were no signs of guarding or rigidity. And the clinical impression was like gastric outlet obstruction. Next slide, please. The treatment and investigations she had, she was apparently normal before December 2018. Then she developed this abdominal pain, which was vague, and she had anorexia. She didn't consider her symptoms serious, and she took antacids and local medications. And when the symptoms worsened, she went to tertiary care centers and medical college. There an extensive workup was done on her, and she was diagnosed to be suffering from stomach cancer, adenocarcinoma of stomach. Staging was T4, N0, M0, and it was inoperable. But the team started her on chemotherapy for 3 cycles to reassess if there is any possibility of surgery. And after 3 cycles, when the tumor didn't shrink or it was still inoperable, she was continued. She was changed to palliative chemotherapy with capecitabine, and 2 units of blood was transfused few days back. Next slide, please. The psychosocial aspects. She was a homemaker, and she belonged to lower socioeconomic class. Her husband was a coolie. She had 2 daughters, both of them were married, and 6 grandchildren in total. She was fully aware of her illness, and she had already accepted it, and she belonged to Hope Rumbold Order 2, Hope Beyond Recovery. She knew that there is no recovery or coming back, and she was wishing for a peaceful death. Daughters and son-in-laws all were very caring and affectionate towards her, and they were able to empathize on her condition, and they fully understood about her and her prognosis also. The 2 daughters devoted all their time in taking care of their sick mother. Though she wished her daughters to be with her always, she was also worried them not able to take care of their respective families. Next slide, please. Medications, we started her on IV fluids, and empirically injection ceftriaxone was started. Then we started on metoclopramide, Rantac, and to control the fever, we started her on paracetamol infusion and suppository. And she was already taking morphine 10 mg tablets, and we added syrup sucralfate also, but it was stopped due to because of the vomiting complaint. And bowel enema was given on next day after coming, and constipation was relieved, but the vomiting still continued to persist, and we tried various medications, like we increased the frequency of metoclopramide, and we added Emisset after decreasing Perinom. Then Buscopan was added, and as Pankaj sir was telling, Perinom and Buscopan should not be added together. Perinom was stopped, and then Buscopan was added. Then Olanzapine was also added, and corticosteroids was tried last because of the potential risk of GI bleeding, and but since vomiting was not resorting to any other drugs, we started her on dexamethasone 8 mg IVOD. Next slide. After starting steroids, her vomiting finally improved, but still she continued to vomit, and the main problem was that the patient was not willing for any PEG or a Ryle's tube or feeding gastrostomy or anything. She did she continued to vomit, but she had a life with some quality at least. And her concerns was about her daughters and family, and she wished to be with them always. And she didn't wish to get admitted in an ICU setup, fearing she may not be able to see her family. And she was also concerned about the family financially, and she didn't want any family to spend more money on her. Next slide, please. Summary, the patient presented to us with a refractory vomiting, and we tried various medications, and finally patient showed some improvement, and she was discharged on her request as she wished to spend her last days at her home. And vomiting still remains to be one of the most difficult symptoms to manage, as Sunil sir and Pankaj sir have already explained. And the patient's psychosocial aspects were well taken care of, and she was made sure that we will try our best to improve her symptomatically, and she was ensured that she will always be allowed to be with her family. And after getting discharged, she survived for 2 more months and she passed away on April 4. Next slide. Discussion points: how to manage a vomiting which is refractory, and how to rule out any differential diagnosis, and how to handle her concerns. The main differential diagnosis we had was acute pyelonephritis, which also has refractory vomiting. But the points against it were the urine routine and counts were normal, and the patient had only one episode of fever. And after starting the empirical antibiotic, the patient didn't show any improvement in vomiting, and there were no urinary disturbance. So pyelonephritis was ruled out, and the vomiting was finally confirmed to be of malignant origin, and we tried various drugs, and finally when it showed some improvement, the patient asked for discharge, and she was given discharge. If the patient was willing for any Ryle's tube, we could have done continuous drainage using a Ryle's tube, or if the patient had opted for a feeding gastrostomy or jejunostomy, she should be given more treatment options. But the patient didn't want any of those. She continued to vomit, but still she had some quality of life, and she expired 2 months after getting discharged from here. Thank you so much, and if you have any queries, please.
Thank you, Adil, for this patient story.
Thank you, sir.
So that's me the previous slide. So we have a lady with stage 4 carcinoma of the stomach with refractory vomiting, and she also had abdominal pain, occasional bloating sensation, and constipation. So they have tried the available antiemetic, and she didn't had very good relief. But with olanzapine and dexamethasone, she had some relief for vomiting, and she was discharged home considering her request. So what are the differential diagnoses that we have to consider in this case?
The first one was acute pyelonephritis, sir, which also will have fever and vomiting. It was ruled out because the empirical antibiotic ceftriaxone should have shown any improvement in vomiting if it was pyelonephritis, and also urine routine and counts were normal. So pyelonephritis can be ruled out.
Okay, so two differential diagnoses that you have considered is one is gastric outlet obstruction, and the other one was acute pyelonephritis.
Yes.
Are there any other differential diagnosis to be considered in this patient? Any participants? Anybody?
Dr. Sunil, can you repeat your question? Sorry, sir.
Yeah. So I was asking Dr. Adul and his team considered two differential diagnoses. One is gastric outlet obstruction and the other one was acute pyelonephritis. Do we have any other DDs to be considered in this patient story?
What about the increased intracranial tension? Have we ruled out central involvement?
Okay.
Intestinal obstruction.
Okay. So Dr. Krebsky says obstruction should have been ruled out first before starting metoclopramide. Okay. So if you another added DD came up was increased intracranial tension. Unless, do you want to consider any other DDs in this patient?
Yeah, Dr. Sunil. Dr. Atul, it was a very good case presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it is a very common presentation, especially in CA stomach. So I agree with your diagnosis of CA because it's a CA stomach. It can be gastric outlet obstruction. But I was a bit surprised with the DD of acute pyelonephritis. I would think of any infection, any infective cause in this case, right? To differentiate it as the acute pyelonephritis, we should have some other symptoms for that also. And the pain also, you said that there is like it was not very specific to any reason. So that is also pointer against the acute pyelonephritis. Okay, but there was one DD of raised intracranial tension. Can you tell like what, why that should be in DD? Like,
The CA stomach, she didn't have any metastasis when she tested last, and so the chances of raised intracranial tension was not that high.
yeah, I agree with you. So that's why it means if there is no headache or no other pointers toward and the cranial pathology, means it will be one of the last DD. So okay, other differential diagnosis here may be like there is any stomach pathology also apart from the gastric outlet obstruction, like infection in the GI tract, or also can be like any ulcerations also can cause such vomiting and fever also, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Metabolic role also. So metabolic usually we see if it is a refractory. In this case, we had used the medications and we were not able to find the cause. My way means we haven't gone that side. So how should we approach this patient? How should we approach in this? We will discuss. Then we will come to electrolyte balance. So how will you approach in this case if a patient is presenting with vomiting immediately after taking food?
Sir, first we have to correct the correctables if any, and if in this case she was thirsty and she had vomiting immediately after taking sips of water also, so it must be some obstruction in the gastric outlet. Okay. And we have to rule out other causes of vomiting, as you mentioned, sir. And so the other options were yes.
Yeah. So can anyone tell me like how we will approach in suspected case of gastric outlet obstruction or intestinal obstruction? what investigation would you like to do in such presentation?
Anybody? What are the, or what
Sir,
will be the
contrast enhanced CT will be.
Okay.
anything? Similar investigation? Endoscopy and abdomen erect X-ray, then serum electrolyte. So these are the comments.
Okay. Yeah. So, Dr. Sunil, yeah, as the people are suggesting the investigation, my investigation of choice will be abdominal and the direct first. If it shows any uh, air fluid levels that points us toward intestinal obstruction. But as you said, that the vomiting was immediately after taking food, so it points more toward any stomach pathology, and that may not um, on X-ray abdomen. So second investigation of choice, either CT scan or endoscopy. I would prefer for endoscopy if the presentations are such like that, because the advantage here is also we can give some therapeutic measures also, like NG tube insertion, bypass tube beyond the level of obstruction. So in a single setting, we can also give a therapeutic treatment also. So as you said, that patients was not so we discussed that treatment if we are establishing a diagnosis of gastric outlet obstruction, the treatment will be the bypassing. It may be either putting a NGT or a feeding jejunostomy.
Yes.
But in this case, that the patient was not willing for any interventions. What all can be the treatment of choice? And what all treatment can be?
In this case, as the patient is not willing for any such interventions, we can try medically to manage her vomiting, and by trying various medications like corticosteroids and buscopan and olanzapine, and the patient should show some improvement at least. And vomiting, even though it cannot be controlled fully, she must have some quality of life at least.
Pankaj, the problem with many of the palliative care units will be these patients are from a peripheral area, and they may not be going to spend many more on a patient who has a CNM. And many palliative care units are not attached to any hospital. So investigations could be really difficult, and clinical diagnosis would be the best thing in this situation where investigations cannot be done. But from a if you look at palliative care units which are attached to hospital, it will be easy to do investigation. I think that will also be a problem for Atul.
Yes, sir. Actually, I work in a peripheral palliative care center, and we don't have high investigatory setup in here. So
Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Sunil and Dr. Arthur. Yeah. In such case, we have to take the clinical decision in such cases. Okay. So we were discussing here what other treatment options can be there in cases of refractory vomiting, and in cases like in such cases where other interventions cannot be done. So, how to reduce the vomiting? These cases are extremely challenging. It is definitely very difficult. Um, using steroids means I will be hesitant to use the steroid initially, as you did, because the patient was anemic and sometimes there was coffee colored vomitus also. So there may be some vomiting associated also. And dexamethasone can increase the vomiting. But yeah, if nothing else is working, steroids will should be used because the patient's quality of life is also important. But with a very good PPI cover and using sucralfate in such
Yes,
case.
sir. Yes.
I don't remember whether you were using haloperidol or olanzapine, because that will be my drug of choice in this.
Olanzapine we used, sir.
Yeah. Yes, olanzapine was used, so that will be my drug of choice in this case. Olanzapine or haloperidol, because both comes as a dispersible tablet and can comes as a mouth dissolving also. But I would increase the dose of olanzapine also. For feeding, that again the patient is not willing for any tube feeding also, or using any gastrostomy, that will be a challenge. So we had to discuss we will discuss this with the family. That will be a concern for the family. If family agrees for even the venting and hearty feed, even that would be helpful to reduce the patient's vomiting. So we have to have a multiple session of counseling with the patient and the family members, that why it is important and what we will achieve after putting the tube. Okay. So, Dr. Sunil, sir, would
Yeah.
you like to add anything else? Sir?
Okay. Olanzapine actually has multiple actions on acts on multiple receptors, and it blocks many receptors, B2, H1 receptor, then muscarinic receptor, 5-HT3 receptor. So it's a broad spectrum antiemetic. If it is in dust, they will use levomethomycin, which is not available in India. So olanzapine is a broad spectrum antiemetic, and olanzapine and dexamethasone combination is usually what is used. And if it is not doing any good with dexamethasone, it needs to be stopped. Olanzapine can be continued, but I think the route of administration will also be important in this case, because the patient is vomiting. So if you are giving anything orally, then it may not be retained. So that will be also another problem. And if you want to reduce the quantity of vomiting, you have used injection Buscopan, 10 milligram BED. But I think we can increase the dose definitely, because 10 milligram BED is not going to be enough. So the volume of vomiting can be decreased by increasing the dose of hyacinth butyl bromide.
Yes, sir.
So the next question was how to handle her concerns. So what were her concerns mainly? Others are spending money on her.
Yeah, she wished to be with her daughters always, and she was afraid that if she get admitted in ICU setup, she won't be able to see her family, and she wanted them to be with her always, and she knew there is no recovery for her, but she wanted to die with when her daughters are with her.
Okay. Pankaj?
So as you said that patient was in acceptance and the hope to hope beyond the recovery. I think the concerns was genuine. That patient was the family members till the last moment, and that was patient went home also. But I think arranging a home care or palliative care at home. Uh, uh,
Yes, sir. We had home care to her home also. We ensured her a quality death also.
yes, yes. I think uh, that would be a good palliative care for the patient.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Is there any antiemetic available in the patch form? Pankaj, do you know any antiemetic in the patch form?
I cannot think of any patches that are available.
Okay.
Yeah, we never used any such patches. Scopolamine patches are available, but that is not used for reducing the vomiting. Uh, Neither to reduce the gastric content also scopolamine. Uh, so, uh,
Is
means
it available in India?
I think it is available, sir, in some centers. Uh, I haven't used any time. I've heard of it, scopolamine, but should not be used. Means we have to go to the literature.
It
Otherwise,
crosses
I'm not
blood-brain
well.
barrier. It
But
crosses blood-brain barrier, and
yeah,
it is hyosin hydrobromide, and it can cause drowsiness. So it is usually used in patients who are end of life.
so otherwise, like we have used sublingually the haloperidol and for if a patient is not use sublingual use of olanzapine and haloperidol.
Okay. How much is it useful, and is it bioavailability? What is the bioavailability by sublingual route, both um, olanzapine as well as haloperidol? Is it practically will it give practical concentration in the blood after sublingual administration?
Um, Mainly our uses means because it comes as a more dissolving medication. We need not to take the medications completely and it can goes into the stomach. Usually the vomiting is not associated, cannot anything possible or eating. I'm not sure about the absorption.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it has been found useful.
Okay. So in the patient, we shall consider um, gastric outlet obstruction, any GIT infection, uh, and increased intracranial pressure. All these as differential diagnosis, and also electrolyte imbalance. And investigations you might do to understand would be an abdomen erect X-ray, and if possible, other costlier investigations if needed, considering the patient's general condition and the disease, the stage of the disease. Um, and this patient with refractory vomiting, you can try with a broad spectrum antiemetic like olanzapine and dexamethasone. Um, and in this patient, to respect the patient wish, we have to discuss with the about habits and make them understand it is not going to be useful in the ICU during the last days of life, and it would be helpful for her to be with her doctors and facilitate that. So thank you, Dr. Pankaj, for this wonderful session, and thank you, Adul, for this very good patient story.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask Dr.
Thank
Sunil
you all.
question to Dr. Pankaj one about domperidone in AIDS patient, as
Yeah.
the CT has not been established below 35 kgs, and our terminal ill patients, some of them may be 35 kgs. So would he still recommend? That is one. And second, obviously, olanzapine in this particular presentation, very nice presentation by a doctor, would be at least 5 milligram. The concern is patient presented with constipation also. How are we going to address? Is it the true constipation or obstipation in this? Fine.
Adil, what have you done for the constipation?
Sir, we did a rectal examination and we found the rectum to be ballooned, and we gave a bowel enema, and the constipation got relieved, sir.
Okay.
Uh,
So about domperidone, I don't know. Pankaj also told he's not very experienced, but I have seen pediatricians using domperidone, then metoclopramide. So I'm not very sure about the dosage, and you have also talked about weight, etc. But I'm not. I don't know about that.
I'll just share. I'll just share. It's not.
Yeah.
It's contraindicated below 2 years of age, domperidone,
Okay. Okay.
and any child below 12 years or less than 35 kg, it to be used with very cautious because the safety profile in 2014 it has been
Okay.
established. So
Okay.
that was the reason.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep. So thank you all, and I request all of you to please fill in the feedback form. Rajlakshmi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj and Dr. Atul, for that presentations today. So we can see you next Wednesday with a continuation of gastrointestinal symptoms, constipation and bowel obstruction taken by Dr. Sridevi. Thank you all for joining in. See you next week. Bye.